My son's coffin was smaller than I ever imagined death could be. It sat at the front of the room like a dark, impossible period at the end of a sentence I wasn't done writing. People whispered, the air smelled like lilies and cheap coffee, and all I could do was hold my iPhone in my palm, replaying his last voicemail in my head even though the screen was dark. "Mom, I'll call you tomorrow, okay? I love you." Tomorrow never came. The funeral home in Florida was too warm for grief. The ceiling fans spun slowly, pushing around air that felt heavy and used. Kara stood a few feet away from me, in a perfectly ironed black dress, her makeup flawless, like she'd watched a tutorial on how to look appropriately sad. Her friends sat behind her, murmuring condolences. Every so often she glanced at her watch, and I had the awful feeling she was timing how long this would all take. When the pastor finished speaking, people began to line up, touching my shoulder, saying the same sentences over and over. "He's in a better place. You're so strong. If you need anything." I nodded until my neck felt made of wood. No one could give me what I needed. I needed my boy back, with his crooked smile and stupid jokes about my cooking. After the last guest left, the room grew silent in a way that hurt my ears. Kara disappeared to take a phone call. That was when a man in a gray suit approached me, holding a leather folder against his chest. "Mrs. Harris?" he asked softly. "I'm Daniel, Michael's lawyer here in Florida. I'm very sorry for your loss." I stared at the folder. I didn't want to talk about money or documents or anything grown up. I wanted to crawl inside the last Christmas we had together and stay there. But I managed a nod, and he guided me to a small side office with a round table and 2 chairs. Kara slid in a minute later, phone still in her hand. "Is this about the insurance?" she asked, not even sitting before she spoke. "There were policies through his job." Daniel cleared his throat. "We'll go through everything. But first, there's something Michael left specifically for his mother." My heart kicked painfully. "For me?" My voice sounded thin, like it belonged to someone older than I was. He opened the folder and took out a plain white envelope. No seal, no heavy stamp, just my name written in Michael's messy handwriting, Mom. The O was a little too small, just like when he was 8 and used to label his school notebooks. My fingers trembled as I reached for it. Kara crossed her arms. "He didn't mention that to me," she murmured, as if it were some kind of accusation. "I haven't opened it," Daniel said gently. "He gave it to me 3 weeks ago with very clear instructions. This is for my mom, no one else." For a second, the room tilted. 3 weeks ago, my son had held this envelope, written my name on it, handed it to this stranger. What had he known then that I didn't? "Go ahead, Mrs. Harris," Daniel encouraged. "Take your time." The paper felt too light in my hands for something that suddenly weighed more than my whole life. I slid my thumb under the flap and opened it. Inside, there was no check, no letter full of explanations or apologies. There was a plane ticket, a single printed ticket from Seattle to a small airport in the south of France, a place I'd never heard of in my 62 years. The departure date was in 2 weeks. Tucked behind it was a small torn piece of notebook paper, folded twice. I unfolded it slowly. In Michael's handwriting, just one short message waited for me. "Mom, please go. You'll understand when you get there. I promise." The words blurred as my eyes filled. My son had left me the one thing I never expected, a destination. And sitting in that too warm office, with Kara watching like I was opening a lottery ticket, I realized I had absolutely no idea what my boy had been hiding from me on the other side of the ocean. I woke up the next morning back in my small Seattle apartment, the sunlight cutting across the blinds like someone had sliced the room into quiet pieces. For a few seconds I forgot everything, forgot Florida, forgot the plane ticket, forgot the way Kara had stared at me like I'd stolen something that belonged to her. Then the silence reminded me. Silence always knows. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at my little kitchen table. The plane ticket lay in the center like a dare. Rural France, a place I'd never seen, barely knew how to pronounce. I wasn't the kind of woman who packed up and flew across the world. I was the kind of woman who saved coupons and kept extra napkins in the glove box of her Toyota Camry. Mid-morning, I forced myself outside. My legs felt heavy, but the fresh November air helped. I took my usual walk around the neighborhood with my old Starbucks cup in hand, The reusable one Michael had bought me because he said I shouldn't waste plastic like a teenager. I used to laugh at that. Today, it only made my throat tighten. Halfway through the walk, my phone buzzed. Kara. I stared at the screen before answering. "Hi, Mom," she said, her voice sounding like politeness pressed too thin. "I was thinking we should talk about that ticket." "I don't want to talk about it right now," I said. She sighed loudly, like I'd inconvenienced her. "I just think it's unnecessary. I mean, France? Alone? At your age?" The words hit harder than she probably intended, or maybe exactly as she intended. "I'll decide what I can handle," I told her quietly. "Well, if you're not using the ticket, you should cancel it. Get a refund. Michael didn't leave anything substantial for us, so at least we can recover that money. Us, not him and me. Her and her future plans." I hung up before my voice could break. When I got home, the apartment felt colder. I pulled out a box of old letters Michael had written from college. One envelope was creased from years of moving around. Inside was a note he'd written during finals week. "Mom, someday I want to take you somewhere quiet, somewhere far away, just us." My vision blurred. I pressed the letter to my chest like it could steady me. That afternoon, Mark called. My ex-husband's voice was rougher than I remembered. "Linda, Kara told me about the ticket. You shouldn't go. It's too much for you. Too much, too far, too old, too fragile." Everyone had an opinion about what I couldn't do, but nobody asked what I wanted. That night, I placed the ticket on my nightstand. I lay in the dark staring at it. France felt impossible. But grief had already taken so much. My son, my routine, my sense of direction. Maybe the only thing left was to move toward whatever he'd tried to tell me. And somewhere between one breath and the next, I whispered into the dark, "Michael, I'll go. I don't know what's waiting, but I'll go." 2 weeks later, I stood at Seattle-Tacoma Airport with my suitcase rattling behind me like it had something to complain about. I'd barely slept. The airport felt too bright, too loud, too fast for someone whose heart was still walking in slow motion. But the ticket was in my hand, and for the first time since Michael died, the world wasn't pushing me. I was moving on my own. At security, I fumbled with my shoes, my coat, my old iPhone that refused to recognize my thumbprint whenever I was nervous. The TSA agent gave me a sympathetic smile, the kind reserved for overwhelmed grandmothers and people who pack liquids incorrectly. "Take your time, ma'am," he said. I wanted to tell him that time was the one thing I didn't understand anymore. Once on the plane, I found my seat next to a boy who couldn't have been older than 10. He was playing some game loudly until his mother gave him the look every parent recognizes. When he finally glanced at me, he whispered, "Are you scared of flying?" "A little," I admitted. He nodded wisely, the way only children who have never paid a bill in their lives can. "Me too, but Mom says airplanes are safer than walking." I actually laughed, an unexpected sound that startled me. About halfway through the flight, the dinner service came. The flight attendant asked, "Chicken or pasta?" But with the engine noise and her accent, I somehow heard, "Chickens with pasta?" and replied, "No thank you. I don't eat birds mixed with noodles." The boy next to me burst out laughing so hard he snorted soda through his nose. The flight attendant tried to hide her smile and repeated slow enough to make the row behind us chuckle. It was embarrassing and strangely comforting. Like grief had loosened its grip for a moment and let me breathe. When the plane dipped toward France, I pressed my forehead against the window. The land looked like a patchwork quilt. Green fields, stone houses, narrow roads winding like old threads. Nothing about it felt familiar. Yet it didn't feel hostile either. After landing at the small regional airport, I dragged my suitcase outside. A few taxi drivers waited in a loose line, smoking and chatting in French. The air smelled different, a mix of earth, bakery bread, and a kind of morning chill that didn't exist in Seattle. A driver with kind eyes helped me load my suitcase. As we pulled onto the country road, I clutched Michael's old Kindle in my lap like it was a passport to wherever he wanted me to go. The driver played soft French music, melodies that made me feel like I had stepped into someone else's dream. We passed rolling fields, sleepy houses, a church tower rising behind bare trees. Then the taxi slowed in front of a tiny restaurant with a hand-painted sign swinging gently in the wind. Warm yellow light spilled from the windows. "Madam, here," the driver said. "This is the place on your paper." I stepped out, my heart thumping. And when the door opened and a woman with tired eyes and a familiar softness looked at me like she'd been waiting, I realized this trip wouldn't just give me answers. It would change everything I thought I knew about my son. The woman in the doorway stared at me for a moment, her hand still resting on the wooden frame as if she needed it to stay upright. Her gray streaked hair was tied in a loose knot, and flour dusted the sleeve of her sweater. She looked tired, but the kind of tired that came from working hard, not from giving up. "You? Are Linda?" she asked slowly, her French accent soft but unmistakable. I nodded, suddenly aware of how small I must look with my travel-wrinkled clothes and suitcase wobbling behind me. She pressed a hand to her chest. "Mon Dieu, Michael's mother." Hearing my son's name said like that, gentle, familiar, as if he had just stepped out moments before, sent a strange ache through me. Before I could respond, she reached for my arm and guided me inside. The restaurant was warm, lit by yellow bulbs that made the wooden tables glow. A smell of onions, butter, and something roasting in the oven wrapped around me like a blanket. My knees felt weak from the warmth, or from the sudden wave of grief. I couldn't tell. "Sit," she insisted, pulling out a chair. "You must be exhausted." She poured water into a glass for me, her hands shaking just a little. After a long breath, she said, "I am Marie. Your son, he stayed here." The world seemed to pause. "My son stayed here?" I repeated, the words barely a whisper. Marie nodded, then disappeared into the kitchen. When she returned, she set a bowl of soup in front of me, something creamy with herbs floating on top. "Eat," she said. "He loved this. Said it reminded him of something you cooked." That did it. I hadn't cried since the night I decided to come to France, but the first spoonful, warm, flavorful, familiar in a way I couldn't place, hit something deep. My vision blurred. I tilted my head down so the tears wouldn't fall into the bowl. "I didn't know he worked from here," I murmured. "He never told me." Marie sat across from me, folding her hands together. "He said he wanted to surprise you one day, show you the mountains, show you the little paths he walked. He spoke of you often." I swallowed hard. "He did?" She smiled sadly. "Yes, he told me you are strong, that you survived many things, that you would come if he asked you." I glanced at my hands, gripping the warm bowl. They didn't feel strong, they felt old, trembling, unsure. But hearing a stranger say my son believed in me made something in my chest loosen. Marie stood. "You wait, I get something." She walked to a small counter near the kitchen and opened a drawer. When she came back, she placed a brass key on the table between us. "For you," she said. "He gave it to me. Said, when my mom comes, give her this." The room spun just slightly. I picked up the key. It was cool, heavy, real. "What is it for?" I whispered. Marie hesitated, then said softly, "For the house, the one he bought. He wanted you to see it first before anyone else." I stared at the key that had once been in my son's pocket, carried through his last days. A key to something he never told me about. And for the first time since landing in France, I felt my heartbeat quicken. Fear, hope, and a strange sense that I was stepping into the middle of a story he left unfinished. Marie walked me through the village the next morning. Her coat buttoned wrong at the top, something I noticed but didn't dare fix because she moved with such determined energy. The streets were quiet except for a baker sweeping flour from his doorway and a cat who seemed to own more property here than any human. I trailed behind her, clutching the brass key in my pocket like a lifeline. "Michael liked to walk here," she said, pointing toward a narrow path between old stone walls. "He said the air helped him think." I imagined him there, headphones on, hands in pockets, kicking at little stones the same way he used to when he was 10. The picture made my throat close. Finally, Marie stopped in front of a small house at the edge of the village. It looked older than both of us, with its faded red shutters and vines curling around the doorway like they'd been waiting for someone to return. "This is it," she whispered. My fingers trembled as I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click, as if the house recognized me. Inside, sunlight filtered through dusty windows. The place smelled faintly of wood, old paper, and lavender. A coat rack leaned against the wall, holding only one item, a worn gray jacket Michael must have left behind. I touched the sleeve and felt the air leave my chest. Marie stepped in beside me. "He worked here, fixed things, planned many things." We walked through the small rooms, 2 bedrooms with bare mattresses, a kitchen with chipped tiles, and a living room where a stack of notebooks sat on a wooden table. My hands hovered over them before I gently opened the first one. Michael's handwriting filled the pages. Notes, sketches, lists. Volunteer house for recovery, meals for patients and families. Mom will love the view from the back porch. I sank into a chair. He never told me any of this. Marie placed a warm hand on my shoulder. He wanted to finish before showing you. He said he wanted to give you a place of peace. A place of peace. My son, my sweet, stubborn son, had been building this world for me while I sat in Seattle thinking he was just busy with work. A mix of pride and guilt swept over me so fiercely that tears spilled down my cheeks. Marie stepped back politely, giving me space. Meanwhile, the cat from earlier somehow wandered into the house and circled my feet like it was appraising me. For a moment, I actually laughed, a wet, broken laugh, when the cat looked up as if demanding rent. As I wiped my face, Marie walked to a drawer near the kitchen. "He left something else," she said quietly. She handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Michael's handwriting, only neater, like he'd taken his time. My fingers shook as I tore it open. Inside was a single letter, folded carefully. "Mom, if you're reading this, you came." My breath caught. "You came," he wrote, "and that means you're ready to know everything." I pressed the letter to my chest, overwhelmed. Whatever truth waited next, my son had wanted me to find it. The next morning, I walked back to the little house alone. Marie had early deliveries for the restaurant, and I told her I needed a moment to let the place speak to me without anyone watching. I wasn't used to quiet that felt this alive. Birds chattered in the trees. Wind swept over the field behind the house, making the tall grass ripple like a slow breath. Inside, the house felt colder than yesterday. I held Michael's letter close, reading the first lines again, tracing the indent of his pen strokes with my thumb. There was something grounding about touching his handwriting, like he was reaching back through time, trying to steady me. I wandered into the tiny kitchen, opening drawers without really knowing what I was looking for. A few old tools, a stack of plates, a notebook filled with French grocery lists, nothing surprising. But then I opened a drawer near the sink and froze. Inside was a small folder stamped with a French bank logo. My chest tightened. I opened it carefully. Inside were account summaries, transfer slips, and paperwork I couldn't fully understand, everything written in French. But I recognized numbers, and dates, and Michael's signature. My pulse picked up. This wasn't just a house. Michael had tied money into it, more than I expected, more than he ever told me he had. A shadow fell across the doorway. "Bonjour, madame." I turned sharply. A man stood there, a tall, neatly dressed Frenchman with sharp eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. He looked like someone who shaved twice a day just to stay perfect. "I'm Philippe," he said smoothly. "Michael's cousin, on his father's side." I gripped the folder tighter. I didn't know Michael had cousins here. Families can be complicated. His gaze slid over the room, assessing it like a buyer at an open house. "I heard you arrived. Word travels quickly in a small village." His charm felt oily, and something in my stomach nodded. "I'm here to help," he continued. "This house, well, it needs someone who understands the process. French inheritance laws, you know." I didn't know, not at all, and I hated how easily he assumed I wouldn't. "I'm managing fine," I said, though even I could hear the thinness in my voice. He smiled pityingly. "You're far from home. This must be overwhelming. Perhaps it's better to sell the property." Michael would want things to be simple, I think. A spark of anger flared in me, small but hot. "You didn't know my son," I said quietly. Philippe blinked, surprised I'd pushed back. "I knew enough," he replied too quickly. "He told me he wished for the house to remain with family, and as you don't speak the language, it would be difficult for you." There it was, the sting, the condescension, the echo of Kara's tone, but in a foreign accent. I straightened my shoulders. "I'll decide what to do with my son's home, not you." For a moment, the polite expression slipped from his face, then he nodded stiffly, offering a curt goodbye before leaving. When the door closed, my knees nearly gave out. I wasn't imagining it. He wanted something, and whatever it was, Michael hadn't meant it for him. I looked down at the folder again. If Philippe wanted this badly, then the truth hidden in these papers mattered more than I realized. I walked back to the restaurant with the folder pressed against my chest, like keeping it close could somehow protect what was left of my son's wishes. When I stepped inside, the lunch crowd had already thinned. Marie was wiping a table, humming off-key to a French song on the radio. She stopped when she saw my face. "What happened?" she asked. I sat down heavily. "A man named Philippe came to the house." Marie's expression darkened just enough for me to notice. "Ah, him. That doesn't sound good," I muttered. She shook her head. "He is, how do I say, ambitious." The way she said it made the word sound like an insult. She pulled out the chair across from me. "What did he want?" "To help," I said, then snorted at my own sarcasm. "He thinks I should sell the house. Says Michael told him things I'm pretty sure Michael never said." Marie's mouth tightened. "Yes, ambitious." Before I could reply, a man rushed in through the side door, a young man in his 30s with sleeves rolled up, hair tousled like he had just won or lost an argument with the wind. "Sorry, Marie," he said in French, catching his breath. "The town clerk sent the documents late again." He stopped when he noticed me. "Oh, bonjour." "This is Lucas," Marie said, switching to English. "He helped Michael with the paperwork for the house." Lucas's eyes softened. "You must be his mother." I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "Sit," he said gently, pulling out a chair as if afraid I might vanish. "Marie told me you found something?" I handed him the folder, feeling strangely exposed. He opened it, scanning the papers quickly, his brow furrowed. "These are important," he murmured. "Very important. They show intent, transfers, authorizations." He was preparing everything. "For me?" I asked quietly. "For you," Lucas confirmed, "but nothing was finalized. And that means someone." His jaw tightened. "Could try to claim it." "Philippe," I said. "Yes," Lucas replied. "He knows the law, and he knows you don't." The words stung, even though he didn't mean them harshly. I suddenly felt every one of my 62 years. Marie reached over and squeezed my hand. "You are not alone," I swallowed. "But I don't speak French. I don't know the rules. I don't even know how to read half these forms." Lucas smiled in a way that was both reassuring and slightly mischievous. "That's why you have me." I blinked. "Why would you help me?" He shrugged. "Michael was a good man, and he deserved to have his wishes respected." Then he added, almost sheepishly, "Also, you remind me of my aunt. She once threatened to fight a banker with her purse. I have a soft spot for strong women." Despite everything, a laugh escaped me. "I don't feel strong." "Strength isn't loud," Lucas said. "Sometimes it's a woman who gets on a plane alone." I looked down at my hands. I hadn't thought of it that way. Lucas began organizing the documents into neat stacks. "We will take these to the mairie tomorrow. I'll speak to them. We'll show them Michael's intent." "And Philippe?" I asked. Lucas gave a sideways grin. "He can try whatever he wants, but he won't win." For the first time since arriving in France, I felt something unfamiliar, but welcome, move inside me. Hope. The next morning, the sky hung low and gray, the kind of weather that made the whole village look like an old photograph. Lucas met me outside the restaurant, holding a folder so full of papers I wondered if he'd slept at all. "Ready?" he asked. "No," I answered honestly, "but let's go." He laughed softly, then led me toward the mairie, the town hall. The building was charming in an old-fashioned way, with stone walls and flower boxes that stubbornly held on to the last blooms of autumn. Inside, however, it felt more like a dentist's office, quiet, cold, and filled with people who looked like they didn't want to be there. A clerk with round glasses greeted us. Lucas spoke quickly in French. Their voices rose, then fell, then rose again. I caught maybe 3 words, none of them comforting. I stood there clutching my purse like I was bracing for a storm. Finally, the clerk turned to me. "You are Michael Harris's mother?" "Yes," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. She nodded, then took the folder from Lucas and began flipping through the documents. Bank transfers, drafts, Michael's handwritten notes. Her expression changed slowly, softening. "This," she said carefully in English. "This shows his wish very clearly. But there's a problem. His cousin filed something yesterday." My stomach nodded. "Filed what?" Lucas stepped closer. "A claim, trying to take control of the property." The clerk nodded. "He brought a statement. He said Michael told him the house should go to family." She hesitated. "Only he could not show any proof." Lucas spread out Michael's notes on the counter. "But we can." The clerk studied the documents again, especially the page labeled in my son's handwriting, for Mom. Her fingers lingered on it. Then the door swung open behind us. Philippe. He walked in like a man expecting applause, scarf perfectly draped, coat immaculate. When he saw me, his smile tightened. "Ah, you're already here. I thought perhaps the jet lag would slow you down." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Before I could reply, Lucas stepped slightly in front of me, not blocking, just guarding. Philippe addressed the clerk in rapid French, gesturing dramatically toward the papers. The clerk listened, but the more he spoke, the more unimpressed she looked. Finally, she held up her hand. "Enough," she said firmly. Even I understood that. She tapped Michael's signature on the documents Lucas had organized. "This matches the bank forms. The dates align. The notes show intent. Very strong intent." She folded her hands. "We will proceed with transferring preliminary rights to his mother." Philippe's face tightened so sharply it looked painful. "This is absurd. She doesn't even live here." "It does not matter," the clerk replied. "It was his wish." For a moment, Philippe's mask slipped completely. I saw anger, real, raw anger, flare in his eyes. Then he smoothed his expression, snapped a polite smile back into place, and turned to me. "This isn't over," he said quietly. Lucas leaned in. "Yes, it is." The clerk stamped a set of documents with a satisfying thud, and just like that, the tide shifted. When we stepped out of the mairie, the cold air hit my face, sharp and bracing. Lucas walked beside me, hands tucked in his coat pockets, as if he was trying not to look too proud of himself. I, on the other hand, felt strangely hollow, like winning a battle I hadn't prepared for, left me unsure of where to stand. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. "I don't know," I admitted. "I think I forgot to breathe for 20 minutes. He cracked a half smile. "Then you handled it better than most people." We walked down the cobblestone street toward the restaurant. I held the stamped papers tightly, afraid that if I loosened my grip, the wind might snatch away everything we had just fought for. My legs trembled with a mix of relief and exhaustion. Inside the restaurant, Marie was stirring a pot of something that smelled like herbs and nostalgia. When she saw our faces, she put down the spoon. "Well?" she asked. Lucas raised his eyebrows dramatically. "We won." Marie clapped her hands together. "Ha! I knew it. Philippe talks big, but he cannot talk bigger than the truth." Then, narrowing her eyes, she added, "But he will try again, like a mosquito." Despite myself, I laughed. A very expensive, well-dressed mosquito. Marie laughed so hard she had to lean on the counter. "Oui, a mosquito with scarf." But the laughter faded when I sat down and placed the documents on the table. I traced the edge of the page with my fingertip. "Lucas," I said softly, "what happens now?" He sat across from me. "Now we submit everything for the final review. It will take time, maybe weeks. Philippe can still challenge it, but it's unlikely he'll win after today." He paused. "But there's something else." My stomach tightened. "What?" He hesitated, choosing his words. "Michael didn't just buy the house, he planned something larger, and with that comes responsibilities." He opened one of Michael's notebooks, pages filled with sketches, financial estimates, lists of supplies. "If you want the house to become what he dreamed, it will require work, time, some money." I nodded slowly. "I understand." But the truth was, I didn't know if I had enough of any of those things. Marie must have sensed the shift in the room. She put a warm bowl of soup in front of me. "Eat first, worry later. This is rule of life." As I lifted the spoon, the door swung open. A villager stepped inside, murmured something to Marie, then pointed toward the square. Marie's face tightened. "What is it?" I asked. She exchanged a glance with Lucas. "Philippe, he is talking to people. Many people." Lucas stood quickly. "He's trying to turn the village against your claim." A cold wave washed over me. "Why? Why does he care so much?" Lucas looked toward the window, his jaw hardening. "Because if he can't take the house, he'll try to take your credibility." I set the spoon down, hands trembling. The battle wasn't over. It was only changing shape. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Philippe's polished shoes in the town square, saw him leaning toward villagers, whispering whatever lies suited him best. By morning, I felt like a wrung-out cloth, tired, thinned, but somehow steadier than before. Grief does strange things. It teaches you exactly how much you can survive before breaking. Lucas arrived early, holding 2 coffees, one for him, one for me. They're not Starbucks, he warned with a grin, but they'll keep you alive. I held the warm cup, grateful for something simple. What do we do now? We show them who Michael really was, he said, and who you are. Marie joined us, looping her arm through mine. And if Philippe tries to talk louder, she said, we talk truer. The three of us walked toward the square. A small crowd had already gathered. Philippe stood in the center like a conductor, hands moving gracefully as he spoke in French. People nodded, murmured, frowned. My heart thudded painfully. Lucas stepped forward, greeting the crowd in French. When they quieted, he gestured for me to come closer. I froze. Public speaking was not my skill, especially not in a foreign country. But then I saw Michael's jacket peeking from my tote bag. The one I had taken from the house. I reached inside and held it for a moment. The fabric was soft, worn at the sleeves. I could almost feel the shape of his shoulders. So I stepped forward. I don't speak your language, I began, my voice shaking. But you knew my son, maybe only a little, maybe not at all. But he came here because he believed this place, this village, meant something. Lucas translated softly beside me. Faces shifted, some curious, some sympathetic. I held up the notebook Michael had filled with sketches and lists. He wanted to build a place for people who were hurting, a place to rest, to breathe. He didn't tell me, because he said he wanted it to be a gift. His gift to me, and maybe to all of you. Marie stepped forward, adding something in French, her voice warm, steady. The villagers listened. Philippe interrupted sharply, waving a document in the air. But before he finished a sentence, an older man stepped beside him, shaking his head. Another woman crossed her arms. People began murmuring again, but this time not in his favor. One of the clerks from the mairie arrived carrying additional papers. She approached us calmly. Madam Harris, she said in careful English, we have finished our internal review. Your son's documents are authentic, legally clear. The property will be transferred to you. Today. The air seemed to collapse around Philippe. His face went pale, then red, then pale again. The clerk continued, and there will be an inquiry into the statement he filed. It appears misleading. He said nothing. He simply turned stiffly and walked away, his scarf whipping dramatically in the wind like even it was disappointed in him. Marie exhaled loudly. Mosquito gone. Relief washed over me so suddenly I had to sit on a nearby bench. Tears came, not sharp ones but warm, heavy ones. Lucas sat beside me. You did it, he said softly. I shook my head. Michael did. No, Lucas replied. He started it. You finished it. Months later, when spring touched the village and the lavender behind the house began to bloom, I opened the home the way Michael intended. People came. Tired people, grieving people, people searching for a breath of peace. We cooked together. We read together. We healed together. Sometimes I'd sit on the back porch with my Kindle in my lap, watching the fields glow beneath the setting sun, and I'd whisper into the quiet, I made it, sweetheart. I finally made it. The house grew quieter in the evenings after the guests left, quiet in a way that no longer felt like loneliness. I learned to love that quiet. It had layers. The soft hum of wind slipping through the lavender, the distant laughter from Marie's restaurant as she closed up for the night. Even the creaking of the old floorboards felt less like reminders of age and more like gentle acknowledgments that the house was settling into its purpose. I would sit on the back steps with a cup of warm tea, watching the sky darken into shades of blue that didn't exist back home. Sometimes Lucas stopped by after work, bringing leftover pastries the bakery couldn't sell. He never stayed long, just enough to make sure I wasn't eating dinner alone. And every time he left, he'd wave and say, See you tomorrow, Linda. As if tomorrow was a promise neither of us questioned. There were moments when grief still pressed against my ribs, unexpected and sharp. A certain song, a certain smell, the way a young man laughed in the square. But the pain didn't crush me anymore. It simply reminded me of how deeply I had loved and been loved in return. One afternoon, a woman visiting the house told me, I don't know why, but being here makes me feel like someone is holding my hand. I smiled because I knew exactly why. This place wasn't just walls and wood and stone. It held pieces of Michael, his dreams, his kindness, his stubborn hope that even broken hearts could find rest. And in caring for his dream, I found something I didn't expect. My own life beginning again. Some endings don't close a door. Some endings open one you never knew existed. And as long as the lavender keeps blooming, I'll keep walking through it.